All right, y'all. We had a little bit of a time crunch. Here we go. Game 7 Sunday. Just an epic Sunday with the Game 7s, Game of Thrones. Everybody's saying it. Everybody on Twitter. Oh, what a lineup. Bleacher Report does a great job with the little kind of graphics and memes and all that stuff. As you can see, I had to let my hair out. Quick story. I don't know exactly when. I'm going on 2 years here growing the hair out because I refuse to cut it until the Warriors aren't champions. And so it could be a whole nother year of growing this. We'll see. I'm kind of, it's hot out here. I live in a desert, so there's a part of me that wants the fresh cut, but I'm too superstitious. I ain't cutting this shit until we go home early. So, hey, I won't mind growing it all the way down my back anyway. So those Game 7s were crazy, right? I guess I'll talk a little bit about that. I had tweeted out, Brett Brown has to go. I hate the contrarian argument from a lot of the mainstream media, like, oh, blame the coach. That's easy. Blame Brett Brown. And no, yeah, I'm blaming Brett Brown, bro. Like, did you see the end of that game, the offensive possessions for Philadelphia? And you knew, just like everybody in the world knew and everybody in that Raptors arena knew, the dribble handoff to Redick, right? That's like their thing. And it was all this action up top like they were the Warriors. And it got me to thinking about Brett Brown and how it's just inexcusable, the lack of execution down the stretch offensively for them. And I was thinking, like, the only possible way that I could give him a pass is if Embiid was campaigning in the huddle that he didn't want to go in the post, right? Like if Embiid was like, every time I go in the post, coach, I poop. My tummy rumbles in the post. I don't know. But you see what I'm saying? That was a bad joke. I didn't deliver that one. But you know what I'm saying is the only way I give Brett Brown a pass on those offensive sets was if Embiid, for whatever reason, was not comfortable posting up, whether it be his fatigue against Marc Gasol, whatever it may be, and he wanted that action, because it is difficult if your star guy, wants something run, or he feels more comfortable doing something, you're hard pressed to go. You can't really go against it. You kind of got to, that's just in my opinion as a coach. But either way, you get the rattle in Kawhi thing. And in the Milwaukee series, I don't have a big take on this. I like Milwaukee, like most people do. I don't think Toronto has the depth. I don't trust Kyle Lowry. Why should I? Right? I think Eric Bledsoe's a bad matchup for Kyle Lowry. Just from a physical standpoint, right? Super explosive, strong and fast. And they're both low center of gravity guys. He just does it way better at this point. He has much more better physical attributes. He's not as crafty as Lowry. And then Siakam kind of showed a lot of Toronto. They look scared shitless. And shout out my guy on Twitter was, talking about Kawhi being a leader and how amazing he is. But I think that if Kawhi was a little more verbal and communicated a little more, maybe he could have talked his guys into being not so scared to shoot the ball. But 39 shots, he got the job done. I think Milwaukee is just better, has better chemistry, better depth at this point, right? And then the Giannis Kawhi matchup, as exciting as that looks like it's gonna be, are they gonna guard each other? The way that current NBA plays out, you kind of want to rest your guy on somebody else. I'm sure there'll be times where they get switched out on each other, and as strong as Kawhi is, he's freakishly strong, and the way he dislodges bigger players, Giannis, I don't see Kawhi being able to bother Giannis when he has a head full of steam. I don't really see anybody. He's kind of like Shaq in that way. So I favor Milwaukee in this matchup. The depth, the chemistry, and Pascal Siakam is who I expect them to use on Giannis. Right? But it's a group effort with both of these guys. And then at some point, the well's going to run dry for Kawhi. The level of difficulty of some of these shots he's making, as godly as he seems, I'd bet on Giannis's jump hooks and dunks and Euro steps to the rim over Kawhi's mid-range pull-ups with a hand in his face, ultimately. So I like Milwaukee in that series, but let's get to what I really want to talk about and what you clicked on this podcast / whatever platform you're watching it on video. Let me reach here and grab my water here, take my time with this business. So I was on record, for those of you, my patrons and people that talk to me on we go back and forth on a regular basis. I wanted Portland and it's careful what you ask for. I don't want to jinx anything. That's not a disrespect to Portland. And I had to think about it. I went back and forth about it as that round 2 matchup between Denver and Portland was going on, because the way I felt was obviously Dame and CJ. Dame being the most scary player in the series, right? He can go for 50. He can take over and win you a game, and that's always there. But Denver, I thought stylistically, one, I didn't want to go to the altitude if I'm Golden State. They still have they had the best home court record in the league this season, and then with Jokic, you have Boogie out, the depth, that bothered me. And I just thought they had a lot of wing defenders. Torrey Craig, Gary Harris. I'm leaving somebody else out here. But they had Torrey Craig, Gary Harris. I guess Paul Millsap's not a wing defender, but they had 3+ defenders. Jokic is such a unique guy to try to stop. I thought their depth, their youth, their younger legs, I thought they were the scarier matchup for the Warriors. And so I think it's best that it's Portland. But again, Portland does, I'm not going to front, they low-key seem like a team of destiny, all that they've been through, adding Cantor and Hood, the shot from Dame, losing their owner, and all that stuff. So by no means am I like breathing a sigh of relief that it's Portland, but if I had to choose, I think Portland's the more favorable matchup for the Warriors. I guess the first question, you're going to see me looking at my notes here a little bit because I want to make sure I hit on all these topics. How much does Damian Lillard have left in the tank? You have an emotional series against the Thunder. I know it wasn't very long, but then that series was as grueling as it got as far as the 4 overtime game in game 2, game 7. And if you watch Dame enough and you see he was coming up short on a lot of his shots, he did not shoot well in this series. And I want to credit Torrey Craig and Gary Harris. I don't want to take anything away from those dudes because they're very good defenders. But I also think there's an aspect of Dame I don't know how much he has left in his legs. You saw a lot of his drives where he just didn't have enough pop to finish the drive, and he was kind of pulling up rather than trying to get all the way to the rim, right? And so that's the question. I think question 1 is how much juice does Dame have left? Will he get a second win, right? Watching Denver's strategy against him, I think it's clear you want to use a bigger defender on him. And there's going to be all sorts of cross matchups and probably some strategies that change midway through this matchup. But I would circle Iguodala as the premier guy you'd put to mimic what Torrey Craig did, the strength, the length. And what you saw he did a lot of the time and what they were very effective with was in order to protect Jokic, they were fighting over the screen and then getting and contesting Dame on his pull-up from behind, kind of. Much like a strategy that Milwaukee uses with Brook Lopez in the game, and you see Bledsoe and Brogdon do. And Denver's guards did a great job of that, Harris and Craig in particular. Did it with both Dame and CJ. Now, I think Dame and CJ are a little bit different, I think, in what they are looking for and what they want. Now, when I say this, don't get me wrong, this is not a rule that you abide by every time down. You have to be dynamic depending on how the game is being played and how they're scoring. But generally speaking, I think Dame, you want to fight over and take away the 3, right, where he stops and pops above the screen, or when he comes around and just pulls right up, right? That's his bread and butter. And so you want to fight over and contest from behind, and the big can show somewhat, right? Just put a hand up and make sure. But with CJ, I think he ultimately wants to get to the mid-range, right? And he's better at splitting. He's better at splitting the big who shows, right? And that split dribble and getting to the cup, as we saw all through that game 7. And so with CJ at times, I think it's best. And you saw them remain dynamic. Again, you can't do the same thing every time because they'll figure it out. But I'm just saying, if you're hedging one way or the other, with CJ, I think you can afford to slip and fight under the screen, what in turn protecting your big man from that split dribble. Now, eventually, he's going to adjust and he's going to start popping the 3 ball, but I just don't think he's as prolific a 3-point shooter as Dame, particularly off the dribble. And vice versa for Dame. Eventually, if you keep going over, he's going to, as you saw in that game 7, he'll start to split the big and try to get to the rim, but how much juice does he have in the legs? Because he wasn't finishing well. Not that there's a lot of shot blockers in the game for Golden State unless Bogut is in there. But again, that strategy, if this game and this series ultimately goes small, which I kind of anticipate it doing, then, you're just going to see a bunch of switches. And so it's not going to be played quite like that last matchup with Denver, because Denver was in the predicament of you had to have Jokic on the floor pretty much all the time. And so they were stuck with that defensive concept where in this series, because both these coaches are eventually going to go small, you're going to just see switching, and you're going to see cross matchups. And I guess you want to see a bigger guy. Clay obviously is going to be in the mix, whether he's on Dame or CJ, and his size and how effective he is. But whoever's the other guy that's going to be guarding, if Clay's on CJ, who's guarding Dame? If Clay's on Dame, who's guarding CJ? Now, Steph's going to have to take his turns. He's going to have to take his turns on both those guys. I don't see a place. I guess you could hide him on Aminu. I don't know how much Aminu's going to play. That brings me to Evan Turner out of the Ohio State. I was high on him coming out. I really thought he was going to be nice. Wasn't he? Didn't Philly take him? Philly, how many misses has Philly had? But anyway, he settled into his role, and you saw him in that game 7. And obviously he's not a shooter. He doesn't space the floor in today's game. That's why he's kind of, not a known commodity. But what he does have the ability to do is if a smaller guard switched on him, he can kind of play like a post player. He can big boy you in the post. His ball security and his decision making is very good because remember, he was a point guard at Ohio State. The memory card is full. That's dirty. All right, well, let me stop and edit this. And my camera just ran out of space, so I'll pause, jump back on, and finish this out. He is just a guy that you can trust with the ball in his hands. Now, is he going to score? No, but he's going to bang around the paint. He's been in kind of big games before, and I just expect Stouts to lean on him, considering that I just don't know how much they're going to get from Rodney Hood, right? Because Rodney Hood's kind of a weirdo, and I'm glad he's not totally hurt. It looked bad, right? But if you look back at his history, he's kind of a drama queen. Remember the thing on the bench in Cleveland? And you saw him getting carried out in the tunnel. It looked like he had been, it looked like he blew his leg out, but apparently clean structurally, nothing wrong, hyperextended the leg. And why I'm bringing up kind of his psyche and his personality is because he's a guy where, right, sometimes he looks like a world beater, and other times he disappears on the court. And so I think his confidence is shaky at times. And he's been on like the hottest streak of his career. I'm not so sure how much confidence and aggression he's going to have in this series with that knee. I think he's going to play at some point. I don't know if it's game 1 or when it'll be, but I'm just not so sure that he's going to come back to being the guy that they've expected in these playoffs off the bench. He's been their biggest scorer off the bench, really finishing games, playing 30 plus minutes. And so that's where I think Evan Turner comes back into play. What else? I guess the thing that everybody's talking about Enes Kanter, and is he going to be able to play in this series? And they're going to give it a go. They don't really have an option with the depth. And there's going to be times where he bangs on the offensive glass and does what he does. Now, if Kerr decides to roll Bogut out to start these games, Bogut, his screen setting, his passing, and he brings a lot of attributes, right? But I think an area where he will struggle is up and down the floor. You're going to see Kanter get him with some rim runs because Kanter, I know the shoulder isn't 100, but his motor and his speed up and down the court, he may run Bogut off the floor, and that's where you may need to see Looney or perhaps Jerebko. And Jerebko is a guy within the Kanter matchup that I circle as the guy I really like because I think he matches Kanter's physicality, and then he's a stretch big, right? Jerebko's a stretch big, and if you watch Kanter, we all know about his pick and roll and screen liabilities, but he's one of those 7-footers that he's been a big his whole life. Every time up and down the court, he has this natural tendency to run back down into the paint, and you can catch him slipping on the perimeter, and he just doesn't really want to get out there. And so I think Jerebko has the size and physicality to match him in the paint, but he can pull him out behind the arc and on the perimeter and catch him sleeping, get some open looks, or just compromise their defense. So, I think that ultimately, though, I think Kanter will get played off the floor. And what I mean by that ultimately is that he'll start games, sure, but I don't think he'll finish games. And then that's where I turn my attention to Zach Collins. I've been a fan of this dude, man. I remember when he got into that little altercation with Clay in Portland in the regular season, and I'm all about it, man. The dude, it's no facade. He is a legit tough guy, but he just grew hair on his nuts. So, you know, he needs to still develop as a player, and he's overzealous, right? He's overzealous at times, and so that what that does is that he's overzealous and aggressive and big, so he's very susceptible to foul trouble. And I think the Warriors, I think that needs to be a key strategy for them. Much like I had pointed out with PJ Tucker in the last series. Don't get me wrong, he doesn't have that type of impact yet. But I think if they can keep Zach Collins in foul trouble, that means more Cantor on the floor. And I think that takes away their best rim protector and their best defending big. So I think that's something that they need to circle and do. But all that said, I expect him to have an impact, have some big block shots. And, you know, if you're Stouts, I don't know why he waited till the second half of Game 7 to roll him out there. I would have been starting this kid. My guess would be is they know that he can't play heavy minutes because of his foul problems, right? And the Warriors just need to be aware of that, especially if you can get him out in space and him closing out. He's just overzealous. But I like him as a player. I expect now Farouq Aminu played the first 7 minutes of that Game 7 and then got yanked. And, you know, his shot has just betrayed him. His confidence has betrayed him. Now, all that being said, he's done very well against the Warriors in the past, and he is, you could argue at times, their best defender, maybe their most versatile defender between him and Harkless. But you saw Stouts just pull him, which he should have. I expect him to go back to the Chief to start this game, but I think the leash will be quick as well, just because he hasn't been performing, and that leaves you with Mo Harkless, who sprained the ankle. We know about the knee troubles. He's not always healthy. He's much like Sean Livingston, where it's like he's a tough guy, so you don't know, is he dogging it or is he hurt or what is it? Because he just gives you glimpses. But I think that we're going to see Harkless and Aminu at the 5, and ultimately the teams are going to go small. And then we're going to see what's what, with especially when Draymond's playing the 5. You're going to see Stouts match with Harkless or Aminu, depending on which one of those guys is playing more confidently and more aggressively. You could even see Evan Turner in there, how physical he is. There's a lot of different options. I think I also have my questions about Kerr. Given that Game 6 performance, is he going to extend the bench? I brought up Jerebko. And I think that Jerebko and Bogut, we're going to see them. I don't question that. My question is, are we going to see Jordan Bell? Are we going to see Quinn Cook in spot minutes, right? Against, and you know, Seth and their second unit, if depending on what Rodney Hood does. There's a lot of variables and unknowns because of how guys are kind of chipped up. And then I haven't even brought up the Slim Reaper himself, Kevin Durant, right? He already told CJ, hey, don't worry about that. Don't worry about contending. Just go play ball, baby. Right. So there's all sorts of little mini storylines in here. If I had to guess, and I'm not telling you guys something you don't know, we've all been paying attention to this. Kerr, if you look at how, you know, his personality and how he plays things, he plays it conservative, and he's going to try to save Durant until the last minute. He may try to not even play Durant during this series unless like the Warriors go down in the series, right? Or it becomes a pivotal Game 6 or something like that. And I don't blame him given this injury. Certain times I think he's too conservative with rolling out, you know, the death lineup or whatever it may be. But I've strained my calf before, and I'm sure a lot of you have strained your calf. And much like a hamstring injury, a calf injury is very likely to be re-aggravated. It's one of those injuries, all the posterior chain injuries, so meaning you can go from your Achilles to your calf to your hamstring to your glute to your lower back. All of those injuries, they're very difficult to gauge the healing process and when you're 100% because you can't really test it. When it's a knee or an ankle or, you know, something in the front of your body, it's much easier to kind of say, okay, this is where I'm at and this is what I can and can't do on this. But when it's the hammy, the calf, you just don't know. It bites you, right? Just like you saw with Durant. And so it's very hard to gauge. So they're going to be cautious and they're going to want to give him as much time as possible. They're not going to risk anything unless the Warriors are in danger of losing this series. I think that covers everything. I'm not really with the predictions, man. I'll leave you with the last thought, you know, because it is what it is, right? Everybody's picking the Warriors, and you look at all the analysts, all the Warriors, and it's going to be 6. Some of them pick 7, right? I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. Obviously, I favor the Warriors, but we have to see who plays. Does Durant come back? I'll leave you with this final thought because I wanted to shout out Dame in that Denver series, and particularly in Game 7. We saw a more mature Damian Lillard, because a few years ago, the way he was struggling in that game, he wouldn't have yielded to CJ down the stretch. He would have continued to jack up shots, and he wouldn't have trusted his teammates. He changed the way he played, and he became a playmaker down the stretch of that game, and that's why they ultimately won it, CJ with the daggers. That's well and good, and he's adapted. We've seen that maturity this season. But in Oracle Arena, in his hometown, against Steph Curry, is he going to do that same thing? Or is he going to go back into kind of a hero ball mode just because of the stage, the opponent, and the environment? And I think that that's something that we got to pay attention to. Like he's done it in the past, but things change and context matters. So that'll be interesting to see if he is so willing to let CJ kind of be the guy, because right now he has the fresher legs and he's the hotter player. So we'll see how that plays out. I will have breakdowns of every one of these games, as well as the big games. I can't promise every breakdown of the Eastern Conference matchups, but I'll have several of those, every pivotal one at least, on my Patreon throughout these playoffs. And then we'll go right into free agency, Zion, the draft, Summer League. I'm going to try to get to Vegas, all that good shit. But I appreciate y'all for tuning into my take. And as always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.
I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy.